So hello, my name is Sarah Russell. I'm Head of Research and Clinical Innovation at Hospice UK. And this presentation, it's like an oasis in the desert, is part of the Hospice UK conference in Liverpool in November 2015. You can see my Twitter handles down there and also my email address. Please feel very comfortable to contact me in the future if there's anything that is helpful to discuss following this presentation. So within this presentation, which was selected from submission of abstracts to the conference, I want to focus on some of the other aspects of communication skills. It's tempting to consider just barriers and blocks on facilitative skills when you're teaching communication as kind of the route to successful conversations. But what I want to cover in this presentation is some of the aspects about the design and use of the space, about the environment and what effect that has on conversations. And why is this relevant? Well, this presentation emerges from the findings from my doctoral thesis on influence on advanced care planning. And one of those chapters regarding communication focuses on the design and the use of space and how they are a catalyst for a conversation. Now, the participants have all been given pseudonyms within this presentation, and they've all given permission for their words to be used in this way. So I just really want to start off with a thought point about the design and and use of space and what human geography, social geography and therapeutic landscapes have to offer us. So this is the Aqua Tower in Chicago, built by Jean Gang, Studio Gang Architects. And as you look at it, you can see that it's already different to other types of skyscrapers. And the reason for this is that it's purposely built. Now, the legend has it that Jean Gang was also a very bird-friendly person. And so when she built the building, she wanted to make it stand out so that the birds didn't fly into it. Because if you think about a lot of skyscrapers and a lot of buildings have those flat windows which reflect the sun and reflect the sky, and birds fly into them because they just think it's an extension of the sky. So the rumour has it is that she purposely broke up the contour of the building so that it did offer something different, so the birds wouldn't fly into it. But also it's purposely got a whole load of balconies on it, which provide shade for both within the staff and the people within the building, as well as birds to be able to sit on. But also it's within the design in itself, it's built for both social and work purposes. And what that represents is thoughtful design to consider the needs of the people within the building and the needs of the people outside the building and how that space is used. Thought about how space is used is not a new one. This is the Temple of Kos from Greece in the 2nd century AD. And again, this has been purposely built. It's on the top of a hilltop. It's got a beautiful panoramic view around it. It has been built with plenty of open spaces and with walkways leading into other places within the Temple of Healing. Sounds a fantastic place. Baths, music concerts, water from the sacred fountain. But what it represents is that healing is about your interaction and relationship with the whole building and with the whole people within that building, not just one intervention, then the next intervention, and then the next. And more recently, well, actually, this is the Renaissance. This is from the Hospital of the Innocents in Florence. What this speaks to me about is the value that a building can represent. So this building was built for abandoned babies, for the babies who'd be left at the fountain there, wrapped in their swaddling clothes. And how Florence responded to that was, responded to the most vulnerable member of their societies, newborn babies, was to build a hospital to care for them. And it's not only a beautiful building with lots of throughput and flow and space, but it represents the social and humanistic attitude of Florence in the Renaissance in the 15th century. It represents we need to look after babies. We need to look after the vulnerable. So I think these examples give us an example of how design and use and value is an important part of the architecture and the environment. And a wonderful example of this is the Maggie Centres across the country. This is the Maggie Centre in Edinburgh. And again, this represents the design and use of a building that represents a value to say that you may want to have space to be emotionally open or to be sad or to be happy or a bit of peace and quiet, and you maybe want it to be a bit homely, but it's a space that is built to be therapeutic in itself, but it also represents the fact that valuing that not all interventions are clinical interventions. Some interventions may just be companionship and company and being with. Of course, this is familiar to many of us. So this is from the Not Dingy campaign, which was in response to a couple of soap operas early in the year who really represented hospices as dull, grey, dingy places. And of course, hospices both within this country and internationally responded to that, saying, we are not dingy. You know, this is just not how you should be representing dying, because we are all about living with dying. We are all about therapeutic use of space. We are all about the building, the gardens, how people and patients move within that building. So this is from Eden Valley Hospice, and I could have chosen any one of the beautiful pictures from the hospices across the country. But it just represents the fact that how we design and use space is important. So why is this relevant? So what? So Keith, one of the participants, gave me the quote about it's like an oasis in the desert. And at the time, I didn't pay that much attention to it. I was busy doing the interviews, transcribing, and it was really only till I started coding and analysing that I realised how many of the participants were commenting about the design of the use of space and on their end-of-life conversations, and how it made a difference to them about the design and what and why it inhibited or disinhibited them to talk about things. So, for example, this is Alfred here, and he talked about the ebb and flow, and he talked about how he observed others. So he openly admitted that for the first 4 weeks that he came to the hospice, he didn't really want to talk about things. But what he did is he observed all the staff interactions with everybody else. So from the receptionist to the nurse to the physio to the social worker to the consultant. And what that did for him is it gave him confidence to be able to start to talk about things when he was ready for it. Christine said something similar, and she was observing the behaviour of staff. Now, she openly talked about that on her bad days, the days when she was very, very breathless, that she wanted to commit suicide. And again, the confidence that she gained by watching how staff talked to other people who were distressed gave her the confidence to start talking about these things with the hospice staff, because it gave her confidence that they were able to have the conversation. They were able to have difficult conversations. They didn't judge her. They just listened to her. They allowed her to talk, and they followed up on those conversations. But again, what this demonstrates was that how the communal space in that area was, is they could quietly observe without intruding. Another example from Christine was about the attitude. Now, she used to position herself by the window every Tuesday, which is the day the volunteer gardeners came into the hospice. And again, what she demonstrates is this feeling of community. I feel part of a community. Everybody cared. They didn't know who she was, but they would wave at her and she would wave back. And she felt that she was in a community where everything made a difference and everybody cared about her and where she was and the environment and the gardens that she was using. Liv talked powerfully about how the environment made a difference to her and actually gave her a feeling of power. I mean, she was quite a powerful lady in herself, but she talked about how the hospice building was built for patients. It wasn't built for clinicians or doctors or management or inspectors. So she talked powerfully about how the front door looked like a front door and how the kitchen looked like a kitchen, and how the Wi-Fi was accessible, and all the little places within the hospice building and within the garden where she could go and sit and talk. She could have a piece of quiet, but if she wanted to, or she could go and sit and talk privately to her friends or visitors, or she could talk privately to one of the clinicians. But the most important thing was it's built for us as patients. It's not built for patient flow. It's not built for the efficiency of the clinicians. It's built for what would work for us. And I think the impact that this had is that it made it easier for people to talk. It made them feel that they were in a community where the value was that you're part of a community and you're a person. But I think this last little quote from Anne is a really interesting one. She talked powerfully about the fact that she was trying to talk to her adult children about the fact that she was going to die, and there were some things she wanted to sort out. She wanted to sort out her will and where she wanted to die and if she wanted to be resuscitated, but they wouldn't talk to her about it when they came to visit her in the hospice room. But it just so happens that when she was there in the summer, they went out and sat in the garden, and she it's a bit like the kitchen table conversation. She sat at the head of the table, poured out the tea, talked to the family, And it felt like she was the mother again. She was the person again. She wasn't the sick mother anymore. She wasn't the sick person anymore. And because it felt homely, she was able to have the confidence to take control and say, I want to talk about this. So the environment, the space, and how it was used facilitated her to have the confidence to have those conversations. So why is this relevant? And I just really want to pick up 4 points and think about how it fits in with the wider literature. Collier, in her amazingly fascinating thesis dissertation about space and end-of-life care, and Walpole and Brown talk powerfully about buildings represent a value and a philosophy of care. And I think that's, for me, that's what some of these findings show, is that a building represents a value of care. It's about how we want to approach people and how we see our relationship with people. It's not just about the physical space to do things. Also, palliative care architecture holds the power to revalidate the invalid as a human being. And I think that links into all that work about, are we sites of biological disruption to our body because of the disease? Or are we actually seeing somebody as a human being and as a person? And going back to the example of Anne, the fact that she could sit out in the garden at the head of the table with a pot of tea and be the mother again shows you how the building, the environment, had given her the power back to being the head of the house, head of the family again, rather than the sick and vulnerable, dying mother. There's something also about self-understanding and enhance the capacity to empathise others. And again, Alfred and Keith both give us, and Christine give us examples of how you observe. By observing the interaction with others, it gives you a bit of understanding about what you want to talk about. And I think there's a little side note there about us as clinicians, about working in an environment where we see patients and their family in the social setting. So I know they're not at home, where they are within the hospice, but actually, if I'm sitting there observing Anne as head of the family, over there in the table in the corner of the garden, actually that gives me a different perspective on her as well. And finally, and I think the thing of home is a contested area, and I think home is very interesting, but how staff move within the hospice and how they interact and how we can bring a sense of homeness in the hospice can be really important about seeing the person rather than the patient. So again, what the design and the use of the space of the building shows us is that buildings are of value, they're an intervention in themselves, they have an effect on us as clinicians, they have an effect on patients and their family as well. So really finally, why does this matter? And I think I really want to give these as a take-home message. Care and care relationships located in, shaped by and shaped spaces and places. And I think that to be true. I think that we do need to look at the design and use of spaces. This can act as a catalyst for end-of-life conversations because it gives people different perspective. It is a matter of perspective. And actually, if I'm in a building or in a space where I can observe others, that gives me a different perspective on my own health and well-being. So I want to finish now, really, and thank you for your time and for listening to this. If you have any questions, please do feel free to get in contact with me, and thank you.